Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for those really great words, Ray. Sorry to run a little late. Had to fix some technical difficulties. Not a boot camp if we don't have those. But welcome again. My name is Eric Duncan. I am thrilled to serve as your MC for the next couple of days, and really dive into some really good content that the Ed Trust has come out with in the last few weeks, months, years, or the last year as we've dealt with this pandemic and some of the issues that Ray just brought up around the continued injustices that are plaguing some of our communities of color across the country. So this is a really timely event, and excited to bring everyone together and really dive into the work that needs to be done to continue to fight against some of the injustices that we've seen. Uh, this boot camp, I think, is really important and timely. We've gotten through over a year of a pandemic that has really done a number on a lot of communities, particularly our communities of color and vulnerable communities. Has done a number on our schools, our education system, and some of the unfinished learning that we really are planning to roll up our sleeves and get after and make plans to provide some support around that, which leads us into some of the really good work that our organization has recently put out to support you all as advocates, our audience members in the districts and schools and communities that you are serving. So, want to just bring awareness to some of the recent work that has come out and that you'll have access to as we continue throughout the course of the next couple of days and moving forward into the summer as we start to implement this programming. If you go to our website, you'll see our main page. There are three really excellent briefs done by our P12 team around strategies to solve unfinished learning, really getting into building these strong and positive relationships, which are, thank you, Tara, for linking in our chat, about ways to structure tutoring, what are the right populations to really engage, train, support, and build the capacity to provide the ongoing instruction that we'll need to make up for some of the unfinished learning that has happened. I'm really excited about our teacher diversity scans that came out in the last few months that are continuing to get some really good use. In addition to some of our higher ed work around reimagining outcomes-based funding, the sort of ways that we really want to bring students back into classrooms where they haven't or where they're starting to transition back, wanting to make sure, given all of the trauma that continues to plague communities of color throughout not just the impact of the pandemic, but the violence and racial injustices that continue to happen, that students go into safe classrooms and schools, not just safe from the coronavirus, but that they're going into welcoming and inviting places where there is talk about the ongoing racism in a safe space, where discipline policies aren't overly harsh. We want to make sure that we're continuing to put those measures in place to make sure that our students feel safe in schools. So that's extremely important. And my colleague, Richelle, recently came out with a really, really good blog about how temporary hold harmless policies could save schools and districts as they're planning for funding and supporting some of the unfinished learning that needs to happen. So just a wealth of resources and information that we've recently come out with that we're really excited about. Again, wanting to reiterate the teacher diversity and equity scans that I think touch on a really important issue related to unfinished learning, which is making sure that, again, students are going back to places that are positive, that are supportive, and we know the impact that same race teachers can have on that issue. So excited about that work. Really, really good work. And we hope that you're able to dive into it if you haven't already. So feel free. Again, I think we're doing a really good job on the chat of making sure that all of these resources are available, and want to make sure that you all take advantage of them. So thank you for that. Uh, Want to also, Ray already did a really good job of shouting out some of the states that are represented here. But our states and our state offices, I work in the national office, and I'm just so thrilled by the continued work that our state offices are doing to support local communities and advocate for change at the local level and state level. So want to just shout out that really excellent work. We're going to feature that a little bit later and hear from some of the states where we have a presence that are just doing incredible work. Hashtag Team Louisiana, love it. Louisiana's been doing some great work. Been able to work with a lot of teachers there and hearing from teachers of color about some of the concerns that they're facing right now, but have been facing for a number of years. And we're hopeful that we can continue to support them. So love that. And continue to use the chat throughout. We really want to continue to engage with you. Love the Louisiana. We got to get some other folks in there though. But want to make sure that you all are engaging the chat, that you are shouting each other out. Team Tennessee in the house. We'll feature them a little bit later. Kentucky, love the NOLA. Miss Mardi Gras this year, so we're gonna have to make that happen next year if we can get these vaccines straight. Okay, Fresno. I see Fresno. We hear you, Tennessee. We hear you. We see you. But want to make sure that we're celebrating all the work that's going on in different states. We know you all are facing different challenges in different states. Detroit, I don't like to mention the state that shall not be named, but Detroit we can represent. New York, of course. Washington in the house. And I'm coming from Georgia right now. So Georgia's in the house. And I'm representing Ohio. So, hate to say it, but we're not big Detroit fans here. But welcome here and glad to have you. Buffalo. So we're really well represented. Texas, thank you. Texas, let's get some love for Texas. Jonathan's doing a great job. Okay, Ohio. Vivian, you're going to have to be my favorite. We get a lot from Detroit, y'all, so we need to make sure we balance these out with some Ohio folks. San Antonio. So we're really well represented. Thank you, Bob Savage. Appreciate you representing Ohio. So really well represented, again, because of all the incredible work that you all are doing in your states. We're really eager to connect with you moving forward as we engage over the next couple of days. Want to emphasize our students as well. And we know we must continue to center our students in this work. So we're going to pay homage to some students who, again, with our sort of emphasis on what's happened over the past year and making sure that we come out of this stronger and better equipped to support students in schools. I want to introduce, we got Nola back in the house. A high school based in New Orleans created this incredible video and piece. It's a collaborative poem. And as you can see, the LB Landry Black Box Ensemble and members of the Marching Buccaneers Drumline are about to open us up and really sort of center us in this space of making sure that students are a priority, that we're creating positive school experiences when students get back. We know it's going to be a lot of work, so we want to make sure school cultures are strong, supportive for all of our vulnerable students and our extremely talented students that we'll hear from in a little bit. But this is a collaborative poem that expresses students' feelings of a little bit of frustration about being silenced in a number of ways in this virtual learning world that we found ourselves in. But beyond sort of the frustration, we want to emphasize how resilient, how determined, how just strong these students are to face what many of us would may not be able to go through, some of the challenges that have been presented, and celebrate their success in being heard. So we're going to go ahead and play a video. And we really want you to focus again on the power and strength of these students.
I'm playing, but there's no sound. Virtually playing for people who aren't really around. I have something to say, but I'm not being heard. I'm on mute. You see my lips moving, but no one hears a single word. Press my mic. Excuse me, please.
Mute yourself.
But I need help with these.
Mute yourself.
And when I don't, you mute me. Keeping me silent in your classroom of virtual reality. In this world of code, screens, and muted sound, human connection is rare to be found. I don't understand, but I feel like this is all a design, one in which you try to limit or distract my mind.
All because the sound of my genius shakes you, evokes your fear. Like the sound of my drum pounding in your ear. This is my steady reminder to you that we will always be here. Music tells my story and transcends the rule of time. My sound grows and swells with the expansion of my mind. But nothing, not even band, it is like it was before.
This virtual life has practically silenced my score. My air supply is cut off. A weight on my neck, something like a knee. You muted my music, and now I
Can't
breathe. I'm playing, but there's no sound. Virtual
I see some really good comments in the chat. We're always inspired by our students, um, and I also saw there were some difficulties or potential technical difficulties. So we'll see if we can share that to just gather some inspiration as we do the really hard work. Thank you, Melva. A lot of us were able to see that video and saw the resilience, the strength, the power of our students. It's really heartening to see young men and young people really just uh, being able to express themselves in that way with such emphasis and talent. Again, I love that. If it were not for students, we'd have no hope. And that's why we do this work. We must continue to center the work and the voices of students in everything that we do. And so let's not forget that. Thank you, Melva, for posting that. And thank you, Ed Trust Louisiana. There's so much talent in Louisiana. I can't even hate, even though I'm an Atlanta native. We don't love the Aints, but we love the talent in Louisiana. We love the talent in New Orleans. And you got to respect that. And so thank you for okay, hashtag 404. Thank you for helping us to get that and to hear from our really strong students. Yo, we could get into the rivalry, but we're not going to do that. We're here to be together and work together to support these students and make sure that schools are ready again for the unfinished learning. But let me give a quick preview for the day. We have a lot of really good content coming up. We'll quickly go through the welcome because we have so much great stuff coming up. We'll have a 30-minute opening plenary where we'll dive into some of the themes of the next couple of days, which we're really excited about. Breakout sessions. So we'll have our first one at 2:10. We'll have a quick break. Go to breakout sessions. We have a number of really, really excellent breakout sessions that you all will be able to choose from. Another break at 2:55. 3:10 will go into state team time. So this is a really good opportunity to take about an hour or so to fellowship with your states, to make sure that you're really getting the essential content that you'll be able to bring back into your states to support all of the really positive work that you're doing and hard work and efforts that you're making to make schools and classrooms better for all students. And so really eager to get into our first state team time after we're done with a number of breakouts. And then we'll have an opportunity to fellowship collectively, to do some networking conversations. Our partnerships and engagement team did a really good job of creating a sort of agenda for these networking conversations and a structure that we'll be able to follow to maximize our time together and make sure that we're leveraging some of the really, really good content, expertise, knowledge, experiences to share collectively with one another. Thank you, Tara, for the link to the video again. So we'll, again, this is day one. We have another packed agenda for day two, but really want to focus on sort of our theme for our 2 days together, which is, it takes a village. And it, again, I know we're working really hard in our states and our local communities to address the concerns that our students and families are facing, but it really does take a village. It takes everyone leveraging resources together, sharing with one another, showing the care and compassion that we have for one another to continue to combat some of the issues that we have, but really celebrate one another and the hard work that we're doing. And so we're really excited about our opening plenary. We're, again, it's called It Takes a Village, working with communities to re-engage students. Really big theme over the course of the next couple days is how we're re-engaging students. We just saw it from our video. Students have felt silence throughout this time and really are desperately needing the connection with one another, with their teachers, with their schools, to sort of face the challenging year that we've had and move forward in a way that gets us back and beyond where we were before. So really eager to sort of dive into this conversation with a number of really good panelists. And we're really fortunate to be sort of led by my colleague, fierce colleague, Lynn Jennings. I'm hopeful that most of you have had the opportunity to work with her. She is an incredible advocate, incredible leader. I've really enjoyed working with her during my time here. Always has bright ideas, willing to engage in this work, passionate and just really bright when it comes to making sure that we are working together to move work forward in a way that leverages the advocates and the strong relationships that we have and that she is mostly responsible for. She is our Senior Director of National and State Partnerships. And in that role, she leads the organization's initiatives to engage and mobilize advocates at the national, state, and local levels on some of these issues that we are going to talk about, in particular, closing opportunity gaps and making that work sustainable so that all students have a fair shot at a strong and meaningful education. The sort of foundation of that work really started with the implementation of the Every Student Succeeds Act, passed 6 years ago. It seems in some ways like yesterday, in some ways like longer than 6 years ago, given what we've just experienced. But that's really sort of the foundation of the work, and the partnerships and engagement team on which she's a really strong leader has continued to build off of that work and support communities across the country. She has a wealth of experience in education. As a educator, she's served in many roles, even in Ed Trust. She's worked for a number of years, but before worked for the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation and helped to direct their professional fellowships program for young professionals working on the Hill. So she's really done an amazing job working with students, connecting with students, and building strong relationships with advocates. So I am really excited to turn it over to her to lead us through this opening plenary.
Well, thank you, Eric. Thank you for such a warm introduction. Make me feel a little old, but that's okay. It is truly an honor and always a pleasure to work with colleagues like you. Folks, I am so excited about this boot camp. This is our second virtual boot camp, and it's all about how do we face the future together. It has been a tough year. So many of our students, their families, their communities have had a rough time. And this has taken its toll on our schools and is definitely taking a toll on our education system. As we all know, the pandemic has revealed and basically just exacerbated so many of the outstanding problems that have pushed the majority of our schools and school districts beyond their existing capacity to effectively respond to students' needs. And we're talking about all students' needs. Schools have traditionally played a role as a social service provider in being able to get certain groups of students certain services and resources that they need. But the pandemic produced a wave of needs on top of all these traditional school demands. And what this has meant is that community-based organizations have gone above and beyond to support the academic and the whole child needs. Such partnerships between school districts and community organizations have let schools draw from the resources and honestly the gems and the values that were already rooted in their community. A lot of these assets help schools to confront their key areas of concern. These concerns included nutrition and healthcare, technology access, childcare, and just overall emotional support in making sure that students are getting the academic content that they need. And we at Trust really have made a top priority looking forward to thinking about accelerating learning and addressing the unfinished learning that so many students have experienced. And what we hope to learn and to better understand and to understand about how relationships are grown between CBOs and schools. We want to do this so that we can think about how do you implement extensive and intensive tutoring, extended learning time, and to just build the strong and trusting relationships needed to create the learning environments that Eric talked about that are safe, nurturing, and places where students feel welcome so that they can do their best and show their best and be their best and be successful. And so that's why I'm so eager to introduce our panelists today. Each has a unique vantage point on the issue. We will hear from them about the relationship between CBOs and schools and how they support each other. First, let me introduce Danae Acher from Mocha Moms. Mocha Moms is the premier voice for mothers of color and provides support for women of color as they journey through all phases of motherhood. Danae serves as the Director of Advocacy and Public Policy for Mocha Moms, and education equity is one of their priorities. Welcome, Danae.
Thank you.
We also have Ray Saldana, the President and CEO of Communities in Schools. Communities in Schools is a national organization that builds relationships that empower students to stay in school and to succeed in life. We invited Ray to come talk to us today about how Community in Schools has worked with and in schools this past year. And what really caught me about their work is how they've thought about how the pandemic has shifted and perhaps even changed some of their approaches to how they do their advocacy work. We're looking forward to hearing about that, Ray. Welcome, Ray.
Thank you for having me.
And then lastly, we welcome Carrie Randolph, the Executive Officer for Strategic Federal, State, and Philanthropic Investments at Metro Nashville Public Schools. From Carrie, we want to hear her tell us about her work on the Navigator program. This is a program that's catching a lot of people's eyes in the ed policy space because it's how Nashville is working directly with community-based organizations to keep students from slipping through the cracks during the distant learning time. Welcome, Carrie. All right, so we're going to get started. Let me first say we have a short period of time together. So this is the plan. The plan is I'm going to ask a few questions, and then we're going to save a few minutes at the end so we can have a Q&A session. So everyone, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat, and someone's feeding them to me, so we're going to get as many questions answered as we can. So Danae, I want to get started with you. We know that during this time, the pandemic has had a disproportionate impact on communities of color and students of color and families of color. And so I really wanted to hear, like, what is Mocha Moms? What have you been advocating for? What have been your priorities for over the past year?
Well, at Mocha Moms, of course, we are a support organization for mothers of color. And what that means, and primarily African-American, Black and African-American mothers make up our membership across the country. And so the pandemic has impacted us because we are normally an in-person organization. We have regular meetings across the country with our chapters across the country where moms are coming to meet in person for whatever supports that we need as mothers. So we have, like everyone else, had to go virtual. And so, but what hasn't stopped, and in fact, what I think some of our members would say has increased and been most valuable are the online virtual spaces where we have offered to support mothers of color. So we've continued to meet, offering, again, the really basic support space where we can come together as mothers to discuss our concerns that are unique to our lived experiences as mothers of color. And as you pointed out, a lot of what that means is, what are we going to do with our children in this time where they need additional support in school because it's all virtual? We had a number of news outlets calling to find out, what are Black mothers and brown mothers doing? And what are the choices that we're making in terms of sending our kids back to school and into unsafe spaces? And many of our mothers were deciding to keep their children at home, regardless of the toll it took on their professional careers. And many of our mothers are professionals, right? So we had mothers who were making the choice to stay at home, leave work, to educate their children, because we know in our communities that education is so important and so vital to our children and what they need. I actually happen to also be an equity professional and serve as the equity director in a private school in my community, which is the Asheville, North Carolina, the mountains of North Carolina. And interestingly, what we've been finding is that stress levels for Black and brown students have gone down since they've been at home. Because as the gentleman said, I think it was Eric who said earlier, they are not going into those spaces because of coronavirus that have been unsafe for them. And that safety has nothing to do with the pandemic. That has everything to do with a very racialized experience that students are having in schools. And so those are the conversations that we've been having with our moms at Mocha Moms, and talking about how we support our students at home. And what does this mean? Because our kids are still going off to college and we're still preparing for that, right? Our kids are still we are in this time where our mothers are still really, really concerned about what it means for our children to be Black and brown and faced with police violence. So those are the ongoing conversations that we're having, and coronavirus has not stopped that.
I don't know, can you hear me? I want to be sure. Oh, there we go. I want to be sure we get back to that. When you talk about the lived experience and the racialized experience. Ray, let me ask you about your, as I mentioned when I introduced you, communities and schools, the advocacy and their approaches to advocacy, and how I'm leading at this point, how the pandemic may have shifted how you think about your advocacy work.
Lynn, thank you so much for hosting this space. I'm just so happy to be on, to be joined by Danae and Carrie in talking a little bit about what I think is I was just talking with somebody about the importance of the work inside schools and outside in communities. Nothing is more powerful than an idea whose moment has come around ensuring that we're supporting students in new ways, and the focus being not just exclusively on academics or standardized tests. I think we're all having a much more holistic conversation. Thank you for the team at Ed Trust for hosting this. So just really quick briefer on communities and schools. We're a national nonprofit, and we work inside schools with a trained psych coordinator. Currently, today, we're working in 2,900 schools all across the country in 25 states. And so what that means, if you're a principal or you're a teacher who has communities and schools as a partner, is that there is a person inside the school who is working and ensuring that we are supporting students with everything that they come to school with, whether it is anxiety, stress, trauma. And to speak to Danae's point, she is absolutely correct in that some of the schools we operate in haven't always felt like not only the safest place, but the most equitable, and haven't created the kind of climate that many of our students, the majority of which are Black or brown, can feel like they are being seen and supported. And so in that way, we bring about 40 years of experience working inside schools. And the way that our advocacy has now changed, and I think it's changed for everybody in this moment, is that we're really recognizing what it looks like to talk about the climate in school. And because we are advocates inside the school for students, on our best days, what we are doing is navigating students through a maze of barriers and pitfalls and landmines that could halt their success, that could halt their individual potential. And the question that we have to ask ourselves, not just as psych coordinators working inside schools, but as a system, is that why those barriers, why those pitfalls and those landmines exist in the first place. And if you're an educator, you probably know those landmines, you know what they feel like because it's written into the discipline policy, or it's written into the funding agreements you have with police officers or law enforcement agencies. And it is in that way that, you know, we are lucky. Some folks ask us at communities and schools, what's the secret to your work? And the real important secret sauce is that we're invited inside schools, which is great. But the reason that folks invite us into schools and allow us to become partners inside schools is because we have shown an impact on the things that they really care about, whether it's around attendance or behavior or course assignment or academics. But we're really going to start focusing on not just those elements. They're important. In fact, that's how we find many of the students who are struggling. But we're also going to have to understand how we are advocates inside schools, working with school leadership, with superintendents, with school boards around some of the policies that are impacting our students. And throughout the pandemic, some of the most incredible partners that we've seen out in the community have been also in historically some of the most under-resources. Those are our housing agencies. When our students were asking us of issues they were having with eviction notices or parents who had lost their jobs and thinking about the local jobs agencies who were not ready for this kind of impact, it also speaks to this level of time that none of us had to really prepare for this. And when that happens, you don't get to change historical underinvestment and mistreatment and discrimination of certain peoples. And so that's what we have just seen and recognized. So again, coming in as an organization with 40 years, having worked inside school with the permission of and partnership of schools, now thinking about the next phase of our work, really ensuring that we are advocates side by side with students, not just navigating them through the maze or helping them scaffold to jump over walls, but really what does it take to tear down some of these walls and elevate some of their voices. And so we today are serving 1.8 million students all across the country, and we are just eager to sort of push from the inside out. And at communities and schools, our staff is ready, and we know that this is the demand of our time. So if we live in these times, if we want to have an influence on the system, important for us all to ask which system it is And for us, it's around public education, and it's relying on the relationships we build, not only with the communities that we are serving in, because each community has incredible assets. Sometimes they just need a little more support, whether that's your food bank, your housing agency, or those social emotional services that we connect our students to that need more support. And we want to be voices to support those agencies as well as our schools, because we think that's what it takes to go back to a version that's not just going back to normal.
Carrie, when I introduced you, I mentioned the Navigator program. So if you give us an overview of the Navigator program, and I have a two-part question. An overview of that, and then also, like I said, it's created quite a buzz. Like, what has made it successful? And for folks who are thinking, can I bring this back home? What lessons would you give them? Or, what piece of advice would you give them?
Sure. Thank you, Lynn. And it's really appropriate that I'm following Ray and Danae, but I'm going to talk about that navigation piece that he was just talking about. And we have communities and schools as well. And I'll talk about how they actually fit in with this work in a second. So early in, I think a lot of us, when schools closed down in March, and we were thinking about reopening, we did reopen virtually. And when we were in our reopening planning, we had this really basic question: how will we know how the students are, right? I think we all worried about that and continue to worry about it. And we early on decided we wanted to be really sure that every student was known, cared for, respected, and supported, no matter the decision, to Danae's point, that their family made about the mode of learning, right? Whether they were virtual or in person when that was an option. So we had to really think about what that looked like in practice and not leave it to chance. I think we talk about this a lot, but how are we intentional in this space? So we launched Navigator really early on, at the beginning of this school year, when it was a felt need, and I'll return to that in a minute. I mean, I think that's what made this possible. So we said every MNPS, Metro Nashville Public School student, will receive a regular check-in from an adult at their school. That could be a teacher, it could be a front office staff member. Every student was assigned a navigator at the school level. And the only criteria was that they were really good at building relationships with kids, right? And those check-ins were regular. We provided scripts to remove barriers. We had a handbook. And don't pass out when I say this, but we did a 10-minute training. And I know that sounds crazy, but we were training on so many things and trying to open school in a virtual environment. So we really tried to remove as many barriers as possible and just give navigators what they needed to move ahead. And so these check-ins started to happen. We listened to navigators and schools. We pivoted. And these check-ins focused on food, housing insecurity, technology. Do you have internet access and a computer? Academics, mental health, social emotional. We check, and these scripts were intentional check-ins in all of those spaces. We then collected data. So every navigator fills out a quick survey as they're checking in with a student, and that is fed into a dashboard that's available at the school level for them to act on the data, as well as at the district level. So this really let us pivot and align resources in ways we didn't have the opportunity to do in the past, and to also connect students with community partners. So what's interesting about that data is we've seen a constant rate of referrals. I think if you had asked me in August, we would have expected that rate to go down over time. It has not. It's been constant. I think there's two reasons. One, we're getting to know students better as that strong relationship is built with their navigator. They're sharing more. Two, which is powerful. Two, our families and students are in shifting circumstances, and we can't assume that what we talked to them about a week ago or a month ago is still true. And so we have this constant check-in system with them. Where the magic really happens at the school level is kind of what Ray was alluding to, right? Where we have a seamless connection to fulfilling that student's needs. This is somewhere we had to work really hard, and I won't say that we have this right yet, but where we have infrastructure like communities and schools, or we also have a community achieves model that we run locally, that is easier. You have somebody at the school that helps make that connection directly. I will also say one of the biggest barriers is this is more work in some ways, right, for navigators. But from the beginning, we talked about it as the right work. We also talked about it as, look, these are the conversations that we have with kids in the hall after lunch, after class, right? We have to do that with intention now, and every student has to have them. We can't have anyone falling through the crack. So that was really helpful. I'll also tell you early on, our navigators saw the huge value add. They crave those strong relationships with kids too, right? That's why they got into this business. And so we were kind of scratching an itch for all of us, like getting at that question of how are the students, how do we know, and how are we doing everything we can to meet the needs that we're identifying.
Thank you. So one of the questions we often have, we get is, what has happened with the pandemic, but it was happening before, as you all have all said, in terms of it takes a community to think about all the other needs that students have, not just to learn their algebra, and what's happening inside the school, but also outside of the school and in the broader community, and how that's brought into the classrooms. That when we're talking to other advocates about this, et cetera, it can be overwhelming, in the sense of how do you know, how do you start matching people up? And this is my value add, this is your value add, and we can work together. I think that's part of it. And then also, to be totally, frank, at Trust, we often get asked, well, what about learning? What happens to the learning? And I'm just curious, how do you all respond to that kind of, to that kind of feedback, or how do you suggest I respond to it?
Well, I think what we see in the numbers across the country, right, is that learning is hard when students aren't safe, right? And so we absolutely have to focus on learning, but a major part of that learning is making sure that we have students who feel safe in our spaces. And I am speaking specifically to, as Ray said earlier, a racialized experience in our school. And this is, a lot of times we talk about race and class as if the two are interchangeable, and they are absolutely not, right? Because what we see across the country is that across class for Black and Brown students are not safe in school, right? The curriculum isn't safe. The discipline practices aren't safe, right? There's a lot of things that are impeding, right, a child's ability to really engage in what is being offered, because what is being offered is not always culturally, I would say most times, not culturally responsive. And I know that term gets thrown around all the time, but we have got to take it seriously, because as some of my favorite trainers from the Racial Equity Institute will say regularly, diagnosis determines treatment. So if we are not clearly articulating what the problem is, then we're going to constantly come up with solutions that don't actually solve for the problem that students are experiencing in the classroom. And one other thing that I would add, what I hear constantly when I work with other schools is a failure, particularly in communities of color, or when we're talking about communities of color, a failure to properly engage families and parents. It's almost as if the students are existing on their own without families and parents. And I will tell you, culturally, Black and Brown parents are deeply engaged and invested in their children's production at school and progress at school. And we just cannot, when we talk about collaboration, we cannot miss that component. And that's what we at Mocha Moms that's a large part of what we do with our Occupy Schools movement. We recognize that not all parents can be there in the middle of the day for a meeting or for a PTO meeting or whatever. So we work really hard to stand in the gap for those other students whose parents can't be there, not because they don't want to be there, because that's an unhealthy narrative that we tell a lot, but parents who cannot be there for a variety of really legitimate and fair reasons.
Yeah, if I can, I just want to follow up with what Danae just described, because what Danae is describing is the movement. And I'm going to borrow from the poet Lin-Manuel Miranda, like, the moment is what we're learning from now. Like, this is how we do school differently. What we will probably trip up on is this movement, because for learning for Black or Brown students who come from communities like the community I came from, it has never had the greatest of records. And what I think we've learned and need to take into the movement is something our founder has been saying for the last 40 years, which is that in order for students to get turned on to learning, they got to get turned on to living. And the living part is sometimes really difficult for students, whether they are struggling with something at home or they're dealing with the trauma that comes from, being felt like things are being thrown on top of them and just burying them at the same time that they're working on the learning. And here's the one big takeaway that I hope we lead into the movement, which is that this is how critical relationships are. This is the learning we took at communities and schools. Of course, as an agency that works in schools, you have to, if you're going to survive through a pandemic and support students, learn how to work outside school walls. And that's the same thing that teachers and principals who wanted to try to find their students, that's the task that they were associated with, was, look, these students are not showing up to virtual learning. We've opened school back up, but they haven't returned. We need to know why. We need to find them. At communities and schools, we were doing, like Mocha Moms, a lot of this on the ground work, and that sometimes means knocking on doors. And what we found is that our site-based staff, much like the navigators I'm sure that Carrie works with, they were recognized when they were knocking on doors because they had built a relationship with the student. And so as somebody who served in local office, I've knocked on a lot of doors asking for people's votes. It is really hard to get somebody to answer the door. It is more difficult to do it in the middle of a pandemic. And you really have to rely on strong relationships to reconnect and re-engage with students. And that's what's going to matter going into that. So in order to build strong relationships, you truly have to work with students on the living part, whether that's around social emotional learning or those non-academic issues or barriers that exist for a student before you can truly feel like you're wrapping your arms around it. That's, I think, the movement. We can fall right back into the traps of tracking along the same things we've always been tracking, but that's the important piece, is building the relationships and ensuring, especially with our students who are Black and brown and oftentimes fall within those cracks, end up being the headlines of these stories of disproportionate impact. That's what it's going to take.
I think I will echo my panelists, my friends here. But I'll also say at the schools, I don't want to paint a picture like Navigator's been easy. We've done a lot of supportive accountability is what I'll call it for schools. But what we're hearing now is that this has helped break down some assumptions about family engagement. And what I mean by that is I think we have assumptions about who will engage and how they will engage and how that will support our work with their own children, which is fascinating to me. But I will say that we've heard from a number of schools that as they've done these check-ins, they've talked to families. You can imagine, right? You are doing a Teams call or a phone call to someone's house to talk with a student. You end up talking with their family as well. And I can't tell you how many schools, as we follow up with them and provide that supportive accountability, they've said, you know what, I get parent engagement now. I get family engagement. I understand why it's important. And this is not going away. Like, I get it. So the value proposition, as we've kind of, I'll call it supportive accountability again, push schools into that space, I think is helping with some of these things that we're talking about here. And Navigator will live on, but I think that mentality will make a real difference for kids, that work is part of the work, and it is the best part of the work and the most important part, I think, is what we're learning.
Okay, we have a limited time, but we have 2 questions that are really pressing. We keep getting them, so I'm going to try to do it rapid fire. One is, I would love to understand the panelists' thoughts on how to best think about measuring and communicating the student impact. Beyond just activities and participation, but how are you measuring it? I think we touched on that a little bit, but and then there's a question about budget cuts and what's happening with budgets and what are we going to do? Politically, there's a fight right now around budget cuts and what that's doing to public education. So any thoughts about that? With these budget cuts, are we making these schools even less safe? And what should we be doing? We have a room full, I guess I can say, of advocates right now who are listening. What should they be doing now?
Let me try to touch the first question, probably in some ways because it's easier than the second question. But here, we want to answer the same sort of thought, which is, how do we know we're having an impact on students, especially if we're talking about measures of social emotional engagement, social emotional learning. And so we have partnered with a group of researchers, and again, this has been a great time for researchers who have been working on what does it look like to support a student's learning in cognitive, non-cognitive ways. And so our partners are at the American Institute of Research, David Osher and his group. You can find more on our website. It's essentially what Carrie described is what kind of information do you put in the hands of a navigator or a CIS staff member to have a more fruitful conversation with a parent, a student, and the educators and create a baseline at the beginning of the year. How many relationships do they have on a school campus? Can they name one or two people that they can come to when they're really dealing with difficult circumstances? They've put into, I think, practice this science that you can really start developing an impact model for your schools or your partners or for those who are supporting your efforts. So that's just on that question.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit to that. I totally agree with Ray. I mean, we have worked really hard, especially across the pandemic, to get strong data use agreements in place with our partners, because when you invite them in, the data becomes shared. And we have decided on metrics together, from chronic absenteeism rates at schools to it gets used in the multi-tiered support system meetings for students and RTI. The navigator data and the data collected there and the work with partners enters into that conversation around a school. And we really are looking at the individual paths of schools, because this situation, it's always called for it, but it's emphasized now. And so we do have some common metrics that we own together with the partners operating in that school.
And I'll add one quick thing, right? I think when we talk about data, oftentimes we're talking about that through a very Eurocentric lens, which is fine. Like, that's important too. Data is always important, but data also has to include basic anecdotal stories, right? And that comes from mothers. I would say part of, if you're collecting all this data and you're not also collecting the words and stories from the parents and guardians involved, you are not collecting accurate data.
Go ahead, Carrie.
Yeah, I thank you, Danae. Yes, I will share, this is not perfect, but we did implement POSSUP this year, which is a text-based check-in system for parents. We have seen parents, and they respond with their own words. It is not multiple choice. And that data, particularly at schools where we've pushed around response rates there and shown that they respond to those, that's been very powerful and something we'll continue. It's not perfect, but I appreciate you raising that. I want to say yes. I just want to co-sign and underline an exclamation point.
All right, so we're about to have to wrap up, and you all dodged the budget cuts question, but I'm going to ask it another way and broader, because I see other things. Folks are coming. What they really do is asking questions about things that are keeping them up at night. So I've got a question here around the policing in schools and also around mental supports. And should we be putting more money in one versus the other? I think I know what how that person would answer that question. So I'm going to ask you, what keeps you up at night, when you think about your work, but also what makes you feel really good, like we should feel good about our future and working together.
So I will say that Mocha Moms, while it's a lot of work, it is all volunteer. We're all volunteers at Mocha Moms. So my role on the board is a volunteer role. It happens to be closely tied to my livelihood as an equity facilitator and trainer. And, right, like the work of my life, the work of my heart is my role as mom. What keeps me up at night, and I think this is an important thing to say, right, that there is no amount of socioeconomic privilege that can protect my children, I have two, from being another Breonna Taylor or another Dante Wright. And that is, we know, a function of what is happening when it comes to policing in our schools, discipline, which we can just title discipline in our schools, as early as preschool. That keeps me up at night, right? What do I have to do to keep my child from not being, to make my child seen by those who may disagree with the way my very bright kids are asking questions because the teachers are not teaching things that are culturally and historically accurate, right? That keeps me up at night. And so I would say, if we're going to talk frankly about money, I would say less policing in the schools and more support going towards one, finding and developing curriculum, which is honest, authentic, and culturally and historically accurate and responsive, and putting in place the resources, taking those resources and giving them to things that are going to serve students for their mental health, right? Social, emotional health, right? I am not suggesting that students of color, right, are deficient. Not at all. What I'm saying is they need all the extra support they can get in these spaces to help them navigate these spaces.
Thank you, Danae. I think what keeps me up at night is that we will start school back up in the fall exactly like it looked in August 2019. I think we've learned a lot in this space, and I'll echo Danae in that it's about each and every student, and that every one of them is known and valued and supported. And if we, to the budget cut question, I won't talk about the cut, but with the ESSER dollars that are available, if we aren't thinking hard about that and looking at data from the last year, because there's a lot there, and it is not just about COVID. And if we aren't thinking about that and reimagining school with kids at the center and family voices at the center, we are missing the opportunity of a generation. And that keeps me up at night.
Lynn, I'll be short, but I think it's a derivative of what Danae and Carrie have talked about. What keeps me up at night is short-term memories. And I think that's what I worry about, because this has taught us so much. People are talking about, the history of anti-Blackness. They're talking about being anti-racist and how it sort of seeps into the systems that we're talking about today and extends even beyond the systems. And that the part that keeps me up, but also the part that keeps me hopeful, is that there's a lot more people who are talking about this issue, and any social movement that leads to change means that it is part of this collective drumbeat. So I'm glad that there are more people in the tent who understand what needs to change within education, within law enforcement, within policies that are impacting young students of color, Black and brown, or students who are low income. And I think that there are state level leaders, the administration is putting dollars to allow us to try to get to a version that's not normal. And that's what I'm hopeful for. But it's always those short-term memories that I think is something that keeps me up at night, that we need to battle against.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Danae, Carrie, and Ray, for getting us started. And with this, I'm going to pass it back on to Eric. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What an incredible way to start the day. Great panel, great information. But let's get to work. So you'll just quick instructions, scroll up to the top of the platform, hit the back button to go into the series of breakout sessions that we have starting promptly in about 3 minutes. So get to those, take a quick bathroom stretch break, whatever you need. And let's get into our work. We have a breakout session from 2:10 to 3:05, followed by state team time. If for whatever reason you don't see your state listed, you can sort of have that as a break for you to synthesize all the great information that we're about to present and that you've learned already. So look forward to connecting with you all soon. See you at 4 o'clock.